Floor, I used to believe that nothing in the world could steal my happiness. After all, I had spent years carefully building the life I wanted, studying hard, carving out my career, Floor, nurturing genuine friendships, and finally finding the one man who felt like destiny had sent him to me. His name was Adil, and he was the kind of person who made love feel safe, Floor, like the first warm ray of sunlight after a long winter. The night he proposed to me is still etched in my memory with painful clarity. It was nothing extravagant, Floor, nothing out of a movie scene, just us sitting in the little rooftop garden cafe where we had shared countless evenings. The fairy lights twinkled above us, Floor. The air was scented with fresh jasmine, and he looked into my eyes with a certainty that made my heart believe this was forever. When he slid the ring onto my finger, I cried, not out of shock but out of sheer gratitude. Gratitude that someone had seen all of me, every scar and every dream, and decided I was worth choosing for life. But happiness, Floor, I would learn, is fragile. Sometimes it isn't stolen by strangers or cruel fate, it's destroyed by the very people you trust to protect it. My sister Eamon had always been a complicated presence in my life. We were close in the way siblings often are, tied by blood, history, and the unspoken loyalty of family. But beneath her affection, there was always a shadow of rivalry. She compared herself to me constantly, my grades, my friends, the attention I got from our parents, Floor, the way relatives praised my patience and responsibility. She never said it outright, but I could feel the quiet resentment burning behind her smiles. Still, Floor, I never imagined she would cross the line into destroying my life. It started small. Right after my engagement, she began making little comments that seemed harmless at first. Floor, are you sure Adil's family likes you as much as you think? Or, sometimes people change their mind when things get serious. I brushed them off, telling myself she was just teasing or overthinking. But then the distance began. Adil, who once called me every morning to say good luck before work, suddenly grew quiet. Floor, his messages became shorter, his voice sounded strained. His parents, who had once welcomed me warmly into their home, began to act cautious. They smiled less. Floor asked strange questions about my past, and sometimes avoided looking me in the eye. I thought maybe it was just cold feet, the stress of planning a wedding. But deep down, I felt something slipping away, something I couldn't name, but it terrified me. The truth came crashing into me one evening when Adil finally called and asked to meet. Floor, his tone was flat serious. My heart pounded as I drove to the cafe where we had celebrated so many milestones. When I arrived, he was already there, Floor, staring into his coffee like it held the answers to questions he didn't want to ask me. He didn't even let me sit before he spoke. Why didn't you tell me? I blinked. Floor, tell you what. His eyes lifted, hard with accusation. About the rehab. About your addiction. My breath stopped in my throat. I almost laughed from the absurdity of it, Floor, but his expression told me he wasn't joking. Rehab? Adil, I've never been in rehab. I've never touched drugs, never needed. He cut me off, Floor, pulling out a folded paper from his pocket and sliding it across the table. My trembling hands opened it. It was a rehab record. My name was typed at the top with a file number, Floor, dates, and treatment details. Words like substance abuse, withdrawal management, relapse counseling glared up at me like a nightmare. I felt my body go cold. This isn't real. This is a lie. But Adil shook his head, hurt flickering in his eyes. Your sister showed this to my family, Floor. She said she wanted me to know the truth before it was too late. They believe you've been hiding this from me, from everyone? I couldn't breathe. My sister? Eamon did this? I tried to explain, to beg him to see that this was forged, but the damage was already done. His family had seen the papers, believed them, Floor, and whispered doubts into his ears until the trust between us cracked. He loved me, I could see that. But love alone wasn't enough to fight against the poison of suspicion. Floor, by the end of that meeting, my engagement was over. I went home that night broken, the ring still heavy on my finger, though it meant nothing now. My mother held me as I cried, Floor. My father sat in silence, his disappointment like another wound I couldn't heal. But the worst part, the part that made my chest ache with betrayal, was that Eamon stood in the corner of the room, her face masked with feigned sympathy. Floor, her arms crossed like she was savoring the collapse of my world. And in that moment, as the last piece of my happiness slipped away, I realized something. Floor, she hadn't just wanted what I had, she wanted to destroy me. And I silently promised myself, Floor, she would pay for this. The days that followed my broken engagement were a blur of silence, whispers, and pity. Everyone seemed to know before I had the courage to tell them. Floor, relatives called with fake concern, neighbors stared when I walked past. Their eyes didn't ask how are you, they asked is it true? Did she really go to rehab? I stopped going out. Floor, my phone became an enemy I didn't want to touch, flooded with messages I couldn't bear to answer. Even the simplest things, making tea, brushing my hair, Floor, looking in the mirror, felt pointless. I had been stripped not just of love, but of dignity, and all because of a lie. At first, I told myself I had to move on, Floor. Leave it behind. My mother whispered as she stroked my hair one night. You're young. You'll find someone better. Floor, don't hold on to anger. It'll only poison you. But how could I let go when I hadn't even understood how deep the knife had cut me? One night, Floor, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the paper a deal had shown me burned in my memory. My name was on it, the hospital letterhead, the doctor's signature. It had looked so real, Floor, too real. But I knew the truth. I had never stepped foot in rehab. I had never touched drugs or alcohol, which meant that document was forged, and if it was forged, someone had risked everything to create it. And I already knew who. Still, suspicion wasn't enough. I needed proof. I started with the hospital listed at the top of the record, Floor. The next morning, with my heart racing, I called the number on their website. A tired receptionist picked up, and after a long pause, she confirmed they couldn't release patient records over the phone. Confidentiality, of course. But my desperation made me bold. I drove to the hospital myself, Floor, walking through the polished hallways with a tight knot in my stomach. At the records department, I asked about my file. The clerk tapped away at her computer, frowning. Name again? She asked. I repeated it, louder this time, my palms sweating. She checked again, then looked up at me with a confused expression. I'm sorry, Floor, but we don't have any rehab record under your name. Are you sure it was this hospital? A flood of relief and rage swept through me at once. Positive, Floor, and if someone used my name to create a fake record? The clerk hesitated, then lowered her voice. If that happened, Floor, it would mean someone gained unauthorized access to our system or forged our paperwork. Either way, it's serious. I pressed her gently, desperately. At first, she resisted, Floor. But when I explained how my engagement had been destroyed because of this, her eyes softened. She couldn't give me direct access, but she whispered something that made my blood run cold. Someone did access files from outside last month. We caught it but didn't report because nothing seemed stolen. Floor, if you want the truth, check your family first. Family. The word stabbed me like a dagger. I returned home in silence, Floor, every sound around me muffled under the weight of that revelation. I had suspected Eamon, but hearing someone else hint at family involvement ripped the denial away. Floor, my chest felt heavy, my breath uneven. Still, I needed more. The break came unexpectedly through someone I hadn't even thought of. One evening, I received a call from Sana, Floor, an old college friend who now worked as a junior nurse at the same hospital. She had heard about my engagement falling apart. News traveled fast, and wanted to check on me. When I told her about the rehab record, her voice dropped. That's strange. A few weeks ago, your sister came here. She was asking about accessing records for a research project. Floor, she claimed she needed anonymized patient data. I thought it was odd, but I didn't question it. My chest tightened. Are you sure it was her? Positive, Floor. I remember because she dropped her ID card and I handed it back. Why would she be looking into records about rehab? The question lingered like poison. I couldn't confront her yet, not without undeniable proof. I needed something stronger than suspicion, stronger than second-hand stories. So I started watching her, Floor. I noticed things I had ignored before, the way she smirked when relatives brought up my broken engagement, the way she slipped her phone into her pocket when I entered the room, Floor, the sly satisfaction in her eyes when she comforted me with fake sweetness. Every detail confirmed what my heart already knew, it was her. But one evening, Floor, fate handed me the final piece. Eamon had left her laptop open in the living room while she went upstairs to take a call. I wasn't proud of what I did next, Floor, but survival sometimes demands you abandon pride. I sat down, my hands trembling, and clicked into her email. And there it was, Floor, an email chain between her and a contact with a generic address. Attached were multiple drafts of a forged rehab record, different versions of the same lie. Floor adjusted and corrected until it looked flawless. In one email she wrote, make sure the signature looks authentic. It has to convince his family. If this works, Floor, she'll finally learn she can't always win. I stared at the words, bile rising in my throat. My own sister, my blood. The girl I had shared childhood secrets with, or the one I defended in school fights, the one I had trusted with every piece of my heart. She had plotted to destroy me. And worst of all, she had succeeded. That night, Floor, I didn't cry. For the first time since my world collapsed, my tears dried. Instead, I sat in the darkness of my room, clutching the printed emails I had stolen, my mind burning with clarity. Eamon thought she had won. She thought she had buried me under her lies, but she didn't know that the seeds of her downfall were already in my hands. Floor. I whispered into the silence, my voice steady, almost calm. You'll regret this, Eamon. And when you do, it will be in front of everyone you care about. And with that, Floor, the plan for my revenge began to take shape. After I discovered the emails, something inside me shifted from hollow despair into a cold, electric focus. Floor, for weeks my grief had been noisy. Tears, questions, calls, the pitying looks. But revenge, I decided, would be quiet. It would not be petulant or messy. It would be precise. I told no one. Not my parents, not my friends. Confession bred complications, explanation invited pity and interference. I needed the truth to stand on its own like a photograph. Floor sharp and undeniable, so that when I put it under everyone's noses, there would be no room for excuses. The plan began as a list scribbled in the margin of a notebook: proof, timing, witness, impact. Each word was a nail hammered into a new resolve. First proof, the forged documents and Eamon's emails were gold. Floor, but I knew they could be explained away as stolen files or altered messages. For the kind of exposure I planned, I needed layers, a forensic trail. I started digging into the hospital details: server access logs, IP addresses, timestamps. I couldn't do that alone. So I reached out to someone I trusted with my life once, Floor, even if he hadn't been there when I needed him most. Haroon was an old college friend who now worked in IT for a small tech firm. Floor. He owed me favors from nights we'd spent studying for impossible exams, and from when I'd covered for him in front of a professor who accused him of plagiarism. When I called, Floor, I kept my voice steady and told him only that I needed help uncovering whether a digital trail existed for a forged document. He listened, then said, Floor, bring me what you have. He was careful and professional, the way professionals are when they sense they're about to step into something that could get messy. Floor, for 3 nights he sat beside me while I fed him the emails, the draft attachments, screenshots of the hospital page. Floor, his fingers moved across his laptop like a pianist's across ivory. At 2 a.m. on the 3rd night, he finally looked up tired and said, there's definitely a fake. Through a VPN. Floor, but one of the access logs points to a location in our city, and the MAC resolves to a device registered under Eamon's name 2 months ago. Hearing her name attached to something so technical and undeniable felt like reading a verdict. Floor. But Haroon didn't stop there. He found a time-stamped login from the hospital database on a day Eamon had supposedly been at her friend's engagement. Floor. He pulled a screenshot and printed it, the numbers staring at me like the clearest kind of proof. Second, witnesses. I needed someone credible who could testify. Floor, not just to the fact of the emails but to Eamon's behavior, her boasting, her careful contingency plans, the cold satisfaction she displayed when my life unraveled. Santa, the nurse who had mentioned Eamon at the hospital, was one such person. I met her in a crowded tea shop, hands wrapped around a steaming cup to steady them. Floor. She was embarrassed at first to have aided my espionage, but when I showed her the emails and told her what Haroon had found, she agreed to help. Floor. She offered to give a formal statement about Eamon's suspicious visit, and the fact that her badge had been used, which could be corroborated internally. Little by little, Floor, the layers grew: copies of her drafts, Haroon's printouts, Santa's willingness to testify, the hospital clerk's often comment about outside access. Each piece made the story harder to dismiss as some melodramatic revenge fantasy. Third, timing. I watched Eamon the way a hawk watches its prey. Floor, though my prey was foolish enough to prance in plain sight, she had become bolder in the months after my engagement fell apart. She paraded about with a curated smile. Floor. Attending boutiques and lunches, posting videos of herself laughing with girlfriends. And then, like a strike of lightning on a clear day, she announced her own engagement. Floor. Pictures of a ring circled our family group chat with the caption, finally, a fresh start. Her fiancé, Sharaz, was from a well-known family business reputation. Floor. Connections. The wedding would be lavish. The engagement party would be a spectacle. It was perfect. I didn't want to ruin his life. Floor. I wanted the truth in front of the people who mattered to her the most. The party would be packed with her allies, her championing relatives. Floor. And the exact kind of people she used to silence me. Public exposure there would do what private confrontation never could. Floor. It would shatter the illusion she had built with other people's trust as mortar. But timing also meant patience. I watched her preparations. Floor. Learning the guest list from a mutual cousin who'd bragged about being on the invitation committee. I learned the layout of the venue, the flow of toasts, who would sit where. Floor. I mapped possible moments when a microphone might be accessible, and when all eyes would be on the head table. I rehearsed in my head the cadence of the reveal: calm, factual. Floor. Devastating. My rehearsals were not just about content, they were about emotion control. Revenge could easily slip into something that made me smaller. I refused that, Floor. I would not scream, I would not beg, I would not become the desperate woman they could dismiss as bitter. Instead, I practiced a steady voice, controlled breaths between sentences, Floor, the small, quiet smile of someone who had the solid ground of truth beneath her feet. There were nights when my resolve wavered. Floor, I would stand at Eamon's bedroom door, at times when she was out, and watch the life she was assembling, glittering dresses, notes from event planners, Floor, a stack of invitations with my family's name in the corner. I found myself imagining the faces of my parents when the truth landed. Floor, my father, usually so stoic, would feel the humiliation of having his honor manipulated. My mother would look at Eamon and see the shadow she had never wanted to admit. Floor, guilt tried to creep in. Was I justified in destroying my sister's dream? Couldn't I simply take the proof to the hospital and to the police? I thought about legal routes. Floor. Haroon cautioned me evidence had to be handled legally or the case could be dismissed. Sana was ready to make statements, and with her help we could build a case. But I also saw how careful Eamon had been. VPNs, fake email headers, stolen paperheads. A legal case would take months, Floor, and in the meantime she would continue living the life she had designed for my ruin. Sometimes law moved too slowly to be justice. The choice was not easy. Floor, revenge was a jagged instrument and justice a measured tool. I wanted both the law to strip away her lies formally, and the public to strip away her respect immediately. Floor, so I decided to do both quietly. Haroon and I would secure and preserve the digital trail to turn over to authorities. Sana would get statements ready. Floor. And I would stage the exposure where her social capital was highest. I also thought about a deal. His confusion? Floor, the pain in his voice the night he folded our future into a paper napkin and walked away. I didn't want to pander to his pity. Floor. I wanted him to see not a broken woman clawing for sympathy, but a person who had been wronged and who reclaimed her dignity. If he returned to watch the reveal, Floor, that would be his choice. I would not call him. I would not manipulate him into witnessing it. This was not about him or about punishment alone. It was about reclaiming my name. Though the logistical details multiplied, I made secure copies of every email and saved metadata. Haroon burned disks and encrypted files. We changed access permissions and stored copies with timestamps so no one could claim fabrication. Floor. Sana made notes of dates and recollections and even kept a private recording, with legal counsel's advice, of a conversation where Eamon admitted satisfaction that the fake record had worked. Floor. Each new piece of evidence was a brick laid in a wall that would protect my claim. Emotionally, the work was grueling. Floor, each fact I confirmed dissolved another small part of the sister I once loved in my memory. Sometimes I would find myself crying for what we used to be. Shared secrets, ridiculous childhood nicknames, the times we ganged up to get out of punishment. But tears became a currency I spent carefully. I needed my presence of mind more than catharsis. I also had to keep a public face. My parents were suspicious. They noticed the way I avoided Eamon sometimes, Floor, or how I insisted on staying in for evenings that used to be for family dinners. They asked questions that I deflected with practiced vagueness. Floor. My mother's eyes would search my face for a hint of what I felt. I could not bring myself to tell her yet. Floor. Part of me wanted to shield them from the bile of the truth until the moment of revelation so that their disillusionment would be pure, unmediated. Floor, as the engagement approached, other people began to circle. Friends I had not seen in months started messaging with congratulations and invitations to the party. Floor. They wanted to bask in the glamour of a cousin's good fortune. It was painful watching how quickly they rallied to Eamon's side while I remained publicly unmoored. Floor. But it reinforced my decision. This had to happen where everyone would see it. The night before the party, I sat alone in my small living room with the evidence spread out like a map. Floor. There were photographs, printouts, a thumb drive, and the recording Sana had insisted I save. Haroon had secured a backup offsite. My hands were steady as I boxed a copy of everything and placed it in a handbag the color of river stone. I slipped the bag over my shoulder and looked at my reflection in the window. Floor. I did not recognize the eyes that looked back. They were harder, yes, but not cruel. They were resolute. And for the first time in months, I slept. In the hours before dawn. Floor. I woke with a calm so strange it felt almost alien. Today would be the day. Today I would speak. I knew the risk. I would become part of a spectacle. Floor. A scandal that would break my family and humiliate my sister. I knew the fallout could be messy and perhaps irrevocable. But the truth was fundamental. It was not a weapon I wielded out of spite, but a medicine that had to be administered to stem the rot. I rehearsed the words in my head again, clear, factual, without venom. This is what she did. These are the documents. These are the timestamps. These are witnesses. I pictured faces in the crowd. Eamon's fiancée, Fleur, his parents, our relatives, the people who had once whispered condolences at my expense. I imagined their expressions shifting, the room tilting from celebration to shock. Fleur. And then I imagined leaving not triumphant but steady, not revenged by cruelty but restored by truth. The night of Eamon's engagement arrived like a storm wrapped in silk. Fleur. The venue was one of the city's most expensive halls, adorned with chandeliers that dripped light like melting diamonds. Floor waiters in crisp uniforms glided across the marble floor with trays of sparkling drinks. Floor. And an orchestra played soft notes that floated through the air like a lullaby of wealth and perfection. Everyone was dressed as though they were stepping into a royal court. Floor women shimmered in gowns heavy with sequins, men straightened cufflinks and adjusted ties, and laughter echoed under the high ceiling. And there she was, Eamon, Fleur, glowing in a golden outfit that glittered with every camera flash, her hand tucked possessively into Sharose's arm. For a moment, I almost faltered. She looked radiant, untouchable. Fleur, the center of gravity in a room that revolved around her. But then I remembered the nights I had cried myself to sleep, the papers with my name smeared in lies, Fleur, the way she had stood in the corner of our house with satisfaction in her eyes as my engagement crumbled. That memory hardened me. I wasn't here to destroy her beauty, Fleur, I was here to destroy her lies. I slipped in quietly, my stone-colored handbag hanging from my shoulder, carrying the weight of every document, every screenshot, Fleur, every witness statement. I chose a seat in the middle of the crowd, close enough to act, far enough to observe. For the first hour, I sat still, Fleur, listening to the endless chatter about the perfect couple. Guests praised Eamon's elegance, Sharose's fortune, Fleur, their match made in heaven. Every compliment was a dagger twisting into me, but I swallowed the pain, because I knew that soon their voices would change. The toasts began. One by one, family members took the microphone speaking about love, destiny, and the bright future ahead. Laughter and applause followed every word. I could see Eamon basking in it, Fleur, her eyes sparkling with smugness. And then, when the applause for her uncle's toast faded, I stood. My legs shook for half a second, but I steadied myself. Fleur, my voice cut through the music. May I say something? Dozens of heads turned. Some gasped, some whispered my name. Eamon's smile froze on her face, Fleur, confusion flickering into panic. Charles's family, seated at the front, looked curious but polite. Of course, his father said, gesturing to the microphone. Fleur. I walked forward slowly, every step deliberate, until I stood beneath the blinding chandelier light, my hands trembling only slightly as I took the microphone. The room fell into silence. I wasn't planning to speak tonight. I began, my voice steady, though my heart thundered. But there is a truth that belongs in this room. Fleur, a truth about the bride-to-be? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Eamon's face had gone pale, her smile forced, her eyes darting to me like daggers. Fleur, you all know me, I continued. I was engaged once too, to a deal, and many of you heard that it ended because of something shameful in my past. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. You heard that I went to rehab, that I was an addict, that I lied to the man I loved, gasp echoed. Some guests nodded, already aware of the rumor. Sharose frowned, glancing at Eamon. That story, I said firmly, pulling out the folder from my bag, was a lie. A calculated, cruel lie. And it was created by none other than my sister, your bride-to-be. The hall went silent, utterly silent, even the waiters froze. Fleur. I opened the folder and held up the forged documents. These are the rehab records she fabricated with the help of someone online. Fleur, this. I clicked on the USB drive connected to the hall's projector, where Haroon had set up a fail-safe. Within seconds, the big screen behind me lit up, Fleur displaying copies of her email drafts. Is her writing, her instructions? Fleur. Her request to make the forgeries convincing. The words appeared in bold black letters for everyone to read. Make sure the signature looks authentic. Fleur, it has to convince his family. If this works, she'll finally learn she can't always win. The crowd erupted. Gasps turned into whispers, whispers into shouts. Fleur, Sharose's mother, covered her mouth with her hand. His father's jaw tightened in fury. Eamon shot to her feet, her voice cracking. This is fake! She's making it up! Fleur, she's jealous! I turned toward her, my voice calm, cutting through the chaos. Jealous, you stole my happiness, Eamon. You destroyed my engagement with lies. Fleur, you showed his family forged rehab records? And now I have proof. I clicked again and a recording played. Santa's hidden tape. Eamon's voice filled the hall. Fleur, they believed it. She's finished. Finally, she won't always be ahead of me. The crowd roared. Relatives looked at her with disgust. Sharose stepped back from her side. Fleur, his face twisted in shock. You did this, he asked, his voice breaking. Ah, a lie, it's all a lie, she screamed, reaching for him. But he pulled his arm away. My voice softened, steady and final. I wanted the truth to be known. You can decide what to do with it, Fleur, but everyone here deserves to see who she really is. The silence that followed was heavier than any applause. Charos's father stood, his expression hard. Fleur, this engagement is over. Eamon's knees buckled. She grabbed at his arm, at her fiance's sleeve, but they turned away. Relatives whispered like a storm. Floor cameras flashed not in admiration but in scandal, and the glittering chandeliers seemed suddenly cruel in their brightness. I placed the microphone back on the stand, floor, my hands no longer trembling. For the first time in months, I felt my dignity return, piece by piece, like light pouring back into a broken room. As I walked toward the exit, people parted like waves. Some looked at me with pity, others with awe, but none with doubt. The truth had been spoken, and it could never be buried again. Floor. I didn't look back at my sister. I didn't need to. I had seen her empire of lies collapse in the most public way possible. And as the heavy doors closed behind me, I felt the sweetest kind of peace. Not the joy of her downfall, but the quiet strength of knowing I had reclaimed my name.